use that to help you recreate your style, or, you know, like, I guess for a lack of a better way to say it, like create that TKI environment so that the athletes you work with get that same experience you had?
Yeah, that's a great question, honestly. First, I would try to assess like what the goalkeeper needs at the end of the day. So I really do like to ask them sometimes because I feel like as much as it's important for me to know what they need to work on, at the same time, I feel like it's important for them to a certain extent to take ownership of their own development. And I don't see them on the weekends for their matches and stuff. I might see a group once a week usually. So I normally ask them like, hey, is there something in a match that you've been struggling with or where you need more support? And then we normally go from there. If not, I normally just try to watch them through training. Some kids I have once a week, twice a week. So
Right.
their struggles or where they need support is pretty clear to me after, 1 or 2 hours of training, and where I can try to help them. And then it's just trying, like, just from watching the match, like you said, I do like to watch a ton of matches on the weekends. It's normally what I spend my Saturdays and Sundays doing is watching, especially the Premier League. And over the years, I've spent a lot more time watching the NWSL just because I think it's important to me and it's important to you guys. So I think it's really important that a lot of people tune in because the game is NWSL is sick. That's another conversation. But just trying to like see what happens in the game and with my resources, how I can incorporate that in training. Like if I'm working on the half space, we've been talking about the half space a lot. That's why it's on my mind. But like, can I get pressure in the box? Like that's normally the case. Like, can I have an active defender? If I have 5 kids, that's pretty easy for me. You know what I mean? Like, can I have 2 servers at the end of the day? And just trying to look at the game through like just watching it live and just see where I can replicate that in training with the players that I have. Tougher in an individual setting, but a lot more easier in group classes.
Yeah, I think that that's how they're going to develop, right? Like you want to create that environment that creates game realistic scenarios and helps them get that repetition without having to be like, do this, do that, do this, then. It's like let them kind of explore and figure it out. What about the support end of it? So how do you incorporate like, you know, your encouragement, your support to kind of drive the environment and give them that feel of it?
Yeah, so I feel like what I'm very passionate about, especially just because of like what we talked about a little bit earlier, just like my story in general, is like making sure that all the kids that I work with really feel that I'm invested in them and that I really do care about them. And I love hearing from like about all their matches or training or just about their day, their week, because like developing that relationship is really important to me because then you just understand that like I'm there for you guys at the end of the day. And I've always tried to serve the kids or the goalkeepers as much as I possibly can. And that's, again, very important to me. And just like highlighting their wins as much as possible. Like someone I work with at the facility, Lex Asana, who you're pretty familiar with, her dad loves to send me clips of the game. And like he texted me one day, was like, hey, I'm sorry if I'm bothering you, but like I just want to share this, or shooting me a couple emails throughout the weeks of clips that he clipped himself just for me to see. And like, I'm sitting at home, it takes 5 minutes max. And like she saved the penalty. She had a very good like phase 3 save. She made a spread. She spread outside the box and like caught it with her legs and stuff. And like that's just like wow. So next time I see her, I like look, I'm like, Lex, those clips like I watched with my phone. I was like, these were incredible, like super incredible. And like if you're really encouraging to the kids in the session to where they feel like mistakes are allowed rather than just like punished at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's just super easy for them to come in with a really good mindset on like, I'm just going to be challenged, but supported at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, that's so sweet. I love it. And you and I both know that like we need more of this. And think back to what you said about feeling really alone as a goalkeeper. I think that is like very natural, whether you have a great support system or not. Like feeling alone as a goalkeeper is something that is pretty commonplace. And I just think it's the nature of the pressure from the position of like, okay, well, I'm the one who let the goal in. Yeah, everyone's going to tell you like there's 10 people I had to get through first. But it still doesn't take away kind of that feeling of like, all right, well, I let it in and now I have to pick it up out of the back of the net. And
Yeah.
like, what could I have done differently? So I think no matter if you have the best coach in the world, like the position can feel quite lonely, but us as coaches can definitely aid in making it feel a lot less lonely and then help them work on that part of like
Yeah. The
managing the
weirdest thing
pressure.
for me that continues to happen, like every so often, a couple weeks, I like talk to a parent that's either just watching the session or I just like, I engage in conversation with them like after, or if I'm just hanging
Yeah.
out. And they're like, yeah, like we love coming here because like the coaches are just so supportive and so nice. Like, and the first thing I normally say to them is like, that shouldn't be like weird. That shouldn't be different. Like that shouldn't
That's
be
not
like,
the golden standard. That should
yeah,
be just the average.
yeah, it should be like the baseline. Like
Right.
I just feel like there's so much pressure on a lot of these athletes to perform and reach the highest level. And again, that's a whole nother topic of conversation
Sure
too.
is, because
But
they're like 7 when people start doing it to them. So, but that's
it,
our
but
tech
like
talk here.
taking the enjoyment out of the game is what really like kills for me to see, is just like being so focused on results. And you guys have definitely talked about this a lot, either on the podcast or just like in general. But we should, as coaches, like be kind to these kids and kind to the athletes, because like we're there to support them. Like something that Jill said that really stuck with me is like our job as coaches is to serve the kids at the end of the day, or the college athlete, or any level. So for me, it's just like, one, I want to be supportive, and like you gain that respect from them just by putting them in challenging scenarios, and they're like, okay, like this coach really knows how to push me and challenge me. But at the same time, like they respect you a little bit more when you talk to them just as a normal human being at the end of the day. And you'll get a lot more out of them. I can't remember the last time I did a lot more or extra when somebody yelled at me or said something negative to me, or like maybe want to work hard. Like you said something nasty to me and I'm like, man, Tori, I really just want to like go at it now. I really want to put my all into it. Rather than if you're supportive, like it's a lot easier for some kid to be like, wow, he's really here like for this next hour and he's invested in me. I just want to give him all I have today. So that's something that's a lot easier for me to do at the end of the day.
That's brilliant. And it's the perfect segue to my last question. So talk to me a little bit about like what makes the relationship so special at TKI, whether it be between you and our staff, or whether it be like between, you and all the athletes we get to work with. What's so special? And I know I'm biased, right? Like, but I'm just going to say, like, we know it's special. Most people
Yeah,
who
of
come
course.
in will tell us like this environment is special. So I just want to know from your perspective, like, what do you think makes it such a special environment?
To anyone that's listening that's never either been to a session, or you just come onto the podcast just to get some goalkeeper insight, or you just think Tori's very entertaining, because I do. I would say you definitely have to be there and maybe be involved to really understand it, because I don't think the words do enough justice to the environment that we create. Going to TKI every day, I said it in my like Instagram interview the other day, I just feel like everybody really cares about one another. And like I'll show up to work and I could have a bad day or something going wrong outside of work, which a lot of people do. But if I was like talking to somebody, I could just feel like someone really cared, and they'd be like, hey, like where can I support you here and where can I help you? And the other great part about the environment is all of us really love what we do. Like we live it, we breathe it, that's all we think about some days. Like I go home from work and I'm watching like clips, or I'm just like thinking about my session. And I just feel like the dedication from all of us to really change the narrative around the position and really push the boundaries of it also helps from like a tactical side and the training that we do. And when you just get a bunch of like wholesome people at the end of the day that just really want to show love to these goalkeepers and understand that they might not get that at club training, and are super encouraging and super positive and very motivated to work, like you just can't beat it. And the kids do the same thing. Like we wouldn't be the same environment if it wasn't for the athletes that come into the facility. And I know it's cliche, like a lot of people say it, like we wouldn't be this without that, or like the game wouldn't be as big without the fans. But it's the truth. Like the kids that we get at the Keeper Institute are just incredible. Like very well respected. They're just super positive. They really want to work hard. They buy into what we're teaching. And I think that's really huge. And people like you, Tori, just set the standard every day, and myself just trying to keep that narrative going and not letting anything crush it.
I'm blushing first and foremost. But yeah, no, I totally agree. And I don't think there's anything I need to add except for maybe a shout to Jill and Maria, because they have created and fostered this environment from the top down. And it quite literally would not exist without them. So since Jill's not here, like I'm going to take the moment to give them the praise and honor that they just so much deserve. But you said it perfectly, that is it. Like it's just the support, the care, the empathy and respect for one another. Like all the way from the top down to the athletes we work with. But you're right, they're so incredible. And I just love the way you put that. So it's just amazing.
They just like, some of them, like I've had a couple instances where a lot of like, some of the athletes are pretty shy. Like some people are shy, but it's really amazing. Like after like my second or third session with them, or even in the group classes, like you really see their personality show. And like my favorite thing to see is just like when they encourage each other, like whether it's a fist bump in the goal, or like them yelling for each other after a big save, because like when you're working with your peers and like you really get support from your peers, and it could be a weird environment, like you come to work with 5 other goalkeepers, and luckily like
That maybe you've never met.
oh yeah, and you might not like train on the same team as them, which might make it a little bit easier in my opinion, just like not having that competitiveness of like who's
Right.
taking the starting role at the end of the day. But it's just really cool to see, like, you could be a little bit insecure, like these 5 people might know more than me, or it's my first time at the Keeper Institute, but then the culture of it, like the kids that have been there that might be in the class or doing the individual, try to bring in the newer faces to make them feel more welcome. And it's just like, it's really incredible to see sometimes that what these athletes are capable of from like a person standpoint rather than what they can do in the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Kieran, this has been great. I'm not going to ask any more questions because I want everyone to soak this one up, but I just really appreciate you. And I think everyone deserves to know how incredible you are. And I mean, if they want to train with you, just head over to Upper Hand, because I promise you, no one's going to put more care into you as an athlete. But if they want to just reach out and ask a question, like where's a good spot to kind of reach you? Is it email? Is it Instagram? What's the deal?
Yeah, so my Instagram, it's been on the Keeper Institute Instagram page, but it's K Burns GK _, so KBURNS GK _. And my email is kburns at the Keeper Institute. If you guys have any questions or just want to reach out, feel free to. I'd love to answer any questions you have, or just want to talk about the position or anything that's like-minded around soccer. I love it. I breathe it. So anything that you have, I'd love to hear from it.
Absolutely. Hit this. Welcome to the Keeper Institute podcast. My name is Tori Corsaro. I'm a strength and conditioning and goalkeeper coach here at the Keeper Institute, and your host for today's show. The Keeper Institute is a unique goalkeeper training facility in New Jersey aimed at developing better goalkeepers and better people. On this podcast, we will be discussing all things goalkeeping, character development, and more.
Welcome back to another episode of the Keeper Institute podcast. This is Coach Jill. Tori is not with us today. I'm holding this one down all by myself. But we have a special guest that I'm really excited to introduce and share with you guys. And Ben and I have had some really, really good conversations over the last few months just about changing the landscape of youth sports and really bringing some attention and awareness to culture, environment, players' mental health, and really putting the player at the center of all the coaching decisions. So I'm excited to have you, Ben, on our podcast. You have your own podcast. You work with athletes in a wide range of sports, but you also have a very knowledgeable goalkeeper background. So do you kind of want to tell us a little bit about what the work that you've been doing in the space that you're working with?
Yeah, for sure. And it's one rooted in my own history. I like to say that. With my playing experience, I was a professional. I played for the Sounders for 4 years, pre and post MLS, and then my career was cut short through injury. I was retired by the time I was 26. So I started going back to school on the physical and the rehabilitation side, while simultaneously going back and coaching with the Sounders Academy. So I was with the Sounders for 4 years. And that led me to overlap with the Reign, the NWSL team. I was the goalkeeper coach there. And because of my education on the physical side, I was a part of the medical staff, and I was the strength coach there as well. In about 2018, sometime late 20-somethings, I went full-time in my practice. I have a clinic in Bellevue, Washington here, where I work with professional athletes, CEO-type people, people with significant injuries and difficult motor control issues, strokes, Lyme disease, different neurological issues. That's just kind of my day job. But what I've noticed as I've transitioned from going into the professional arena to working more with some youth athletes and youth soccer athletes, youth baseball athletes, I've noticed a climate issue with youth sports that's developed. Kids are getting exposed to similar stresses that I was exposed to as a professional athlete, without any guidance or resources on how to handle that correctly. Without actually asking the question, is that appropriate for what I should be doing? Without asking the questions, is that going to be actually helping my performance or hindering it at my stage of life? So I sought out to help youth athletes. And the more I educated kids on how to increase their performance, whether that's in the goalkeeping arena, the physical space, or the mental space, I started to notice that you release them back into their environments and they come back with the exact same problems. So in reality, if we want to help these kids perform their best, be mentally well, physically well, so they can perform well, we need to start addressing the environments which inherently are controlled by adults. So that's what my company does now, is it helps educate adults on how to create more effective and healthy environments for kids so they have the opportunity to perform, not create performance by sacrificing their well-being.
Why do you think this is such a big hurdle for coaches to buy into treating people well, creating a great environment? Do you think it is the results that like get in the way of that, or what do you think? Have you identified what that is?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of outcome-based thinking. They place their value on the score sheet versus the processes that got them there. I think there's a real lack of understanding of why they're engaging in these processes in the first place. So we are training this many damn times a week because the professional team is training this many times a week, and that's the most logical reason. Except the logic is out the door when you're talking about that's a 12-year-old versus a 24-year-old human adult who's inherently giving their entire life to make sure they focus on their job versus a kid who has school, social life, crazy stresses that I didn't experience. They're not taking those into account. So for me, the education process is, why are we doing these things? And if we're going to require them to train this much, we better make sure that environment is a space that they want to go to, and it gives them energy, and it makes sure it's psychologically safe and they don't feel more stressed by going there. Because that's not a space for high performance.
I think the misconception is that it's either be in a really good environment or win. And that those two things actually are probably work more hand in hand, is that when you create a better environment, each individual player, wants to be there more and show up for practice, but they're going to work harder. Maybe not work, I don't like that word, but enjoy it more, and they're going to get better and they're going to perform better, which puts your team in a better position to win. So really, I feel like coaching in a way that you're designing the environment actually will lead to better outcomes.
Yeah, it has to. It's more sustainable.
Right.
And in reality, how many of these kids are going to go pro? Well, the statistics are tough. Please strive for it. If that's what you want to do, that's great. But do it with your eyes wide open and have the right guidance when you're going for it. Professional athletes are in a play state. They're enjoying what they're doing. They just have a really high standard of execution. This is where people get confused. I don't want to go to that environment because it's too loose and they're having too much fun. Well, the reality of that is that's what you should be doing because you're playing a game. It's probably on your shoulders and your maturity level to not understand that you can play and have fun while doing really good work.
Right.
That's the difference maker. It's not one or the other. It's not, you don't have to be punished to have discipline. Discipline should be positive and going towards your goals and going towards your outcome, and that should be a great experience. It's not going to be an easy experience, but a great experience.
Well, I think that's what I'm mostly interested in your help is with, can you potentially shine a light on what we have widely accepted as okay that might be toxic, actually, if you look under the hood, that this behavior from this coach or this environment is toxic, but we've widely accepted it that it is okay?
Well, I think before we even go to there, I think the most toxic thing going on is a lack of understanding of what's going on. I think the awareness that because of the climate of youth sports, because of the climate of social life, because of the climate of performance in school, you have a total cost and an energy allocation for all this stuff. And kids are already walking into your environment depleted. So without that understanding, you don't know what kind of stresses you can put on somebody. Because we do want to put stress on kids and coach them and get them to tolerate more and be more resilient and all those good things that we think we're doing. But they're walking in with maybe a nostril above water, and then you're beating them down in an environment where they need to be coming out of the water. You're pushing their head down. And then you label the kid without being curious as, oh, they don't have what it takes, or they don't have this, they don't have, whatever. If you were curious about this stuff and started asking questions and connect and get to know the person, you might understand that, wow, this person needs help performance isn't just what's on the field now. It has to come from all these aspects of life, and we have to be able to pay attention to it, understand it, and enhance it all. And that now comes with parents, coaches, and entire support network that kids need to thrive and flourish.
And where does that stem from, creating that environment? Is it the director of coaching? Is it the individual coach? Is it goalkeeper coaches? Is it parents?
It comes from, in my opinion, the club's stated values, and are they being lived and exercised well? Because a lot of times a culture and a value set is this beautiful, pretty thing they put up on the wall, and the words are great, but that's all they are words on the wall. They're not intentionally lived, and they don't come from the heart. They're just there to, yep, see, that's our culture. That's great. It's like, well, audit it. Look in the mirror. And that's probably the big issue, is looking in the mirror. Like, are your behaviors matching up with the culture that you say you are? Because if it's not, then you are not creating the right environment for the kids that are coming into this. And you're setting, you're disrespecting the expectations that they have. Because you declared this as a club that this is what they're going to be getting, and your coaches are not doing it. And this has nothing to do with X's and O's.
Right. Totally. Yeah. It's just the way you live your life and the way you treat people. Is there a way that parents and players can hold coaches accountable to those values that they put on their website or in their mission statement, but it couldn't be maybe further from the truth at some clubs or further from reality?
I think it has to be understood by the coaches and the parents for sure. And depending on the age of the player, then we can start to integrate that, because at pre-puberty and all that, they should just be out there playing and having a great time, a great experience while learning cool stuff. But as it starts to get more specialized, and the problem we have is we're specializing at 12, and we should be specializing a little bit older when they go through puberty and they can cognitively understand it, then we can start to ask those questions. But the value alignment needs to be with the adults first, and then bring in the kids. And values are drivers of behavior. And not everyone's going to have the same values, but if we have an understanding of each group's set of values, then we can bring things closer together.
And what age do you think is appropriate for players to start having those types of conversations with their coaches? Like, hey, I mean, for me, like when goalkeepers are spoken to incorrectly and it doesn't make them feel empowered, my first thought is, okay, can you at least have a conversation with your coach when the dust has settled and just say, hey, I hear what you're saying, but that doesn't really make me, the way you delivered that didn't really work for me. That didn't really make me feel comfortable. I actually felt more on edge after you said that. Do you, first of all, I guess, do you encourage those types of conversations between players and coaches? And at which age is it, do you think, healthy for those players to have those types of conversations with coaches?
Well, I've started back up with the Sounders Academy doing goalkeepers and working from 13s all the way up to the 18s. And every age group, I've said that. I'm here for you. We have high expectations here. We have high standards. And you have my support within this, though. This is a psychologically safe environment. I use those words. You guys are safe here. I want you to express yourself and be free. Because if you're worried about things that aren't even relevant to goalkeeping, we need to talk about that and get that out of the way so you can perform more on the goalkeeping side. So this day and age, learning the emotional intelligence, or not learning, but teaching it and creating an environment that is safe to start practicing emotional intelligence or the pursuit of, we have to start earlier and earlier.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have a 4-year-old son. I talk to him about it, like being able to understand his emotions and being able to, I literally say this every day, ask for your needs to be met. Just ask. You know, you don't have to cry and whine and throw a tantrum. You can just say, hey, I really need to watch Octonauts this morning. And the answer might be yes, and the answer might be no, but at least he's identified that's what he needs in that moment. And being able to articulate that and verbalize that, I think, is really important, because everyone's experience is important, right? Like, if I said something that really upset someone, I would want to know, because I want that person to have a really great experience. Like, I want them to enjoy football, and I wouldn't ever want to be the reason why they're not enjoying the game or they're not enjoying their experience playing the game that they really love to play. And I think giving players agency, one, helps them reflect on, did that feel okay for me, or how am I feeling, and being able to label that emotion, and then being able to regulate it or co-regulate it with an adult, and then being able to maybe come to some kind of solution or reconcile, like, hey coach, I need this here, and is there any way that you can provide me that space, something along those lines. Is that something that you teach your athletes to be able to manage in the environment, but also maybe when they go home and reflect after?
Yeah, for sure. And it's important because it's a life skill. And we
Mm-hmm.
want the sports to be transcending these. This is the whole purpose of the whole thing, is to be able to take these skills and apply them later in life, not experience sports and then have to go to therapy afterwards, like a lot of people have to do, right?
Right.
That's the opposite. We're trying to create an environment where you get exposed to the appropriate dosage of stresses, you get resilient and callous it down so you can tolerate more and more, and you find some way to thrive in that environment, and it's really, really a cool thing. And there's great experiences to go along with it. The pieces that we need to heighten awareness of are the kids, when they come into your world, coach, they're navigating your environment first. That's their number one stress in your presence, without even taking into account the stress that they're bringing with them. So we have to have that awareness. That's what they're navigating, is how to figure things out. And if you don't have clarity of expectations, and if you're not providing a psychologically safe environment for them to make mistakes, speak on it, and learn from it, you're already doing them a disservice.
Right.
And then number two is we have to understand how these things actually interrelate physiologically. Cognitive states have effect on your physical system.
Mm-hmm.
If you have cognitive stress or you're overthinking, you're going to have depleted output on your muscular system. Your motor control is going to go down. There's going to be different things going on. That's why I'm saying get curious about why a technique is off. Get curious about why a kid is not doing as well as you think they should be, versus punishing.
Right.
Yelling isn't the answer. Maybe there's stuff going on underneath the skin in their head that you're not aware of that is really affecting what's going on there. And get curious about that type of stuff. Same thing goes for the parents.
That's a really good point. I'm also just writing as you're talking, because I love that. Like, curiosity, I think, is one of our X factors at TKI. Is like, you're seeing something, but that could be a result of so many different things, right? Like, I'm seeing someone's performance, and that could be, okay, they're not performing well because they didn't sleep last night well, because they had a big test and they were anxious, or they had a really difficult conversation and conflict within a relationship, right? And I think we only see what is currently before us, and I really like that. Get curious about, maybe just go a layer underneath of that, to find out the why. Essentially, we're seeing what it is, but why is it like that? Do you
real quick, curiosity has massive benefit too to the coach.
Mm-hmm.
It actually drives dopamine. It makes you more motivated to learn more. There's no reason to not be curious about something. In reality, it's a win-win.
Yeah. It's so funny every time. Like, I've enjoyed our conversations, like, apart from this podcast, because I'll say something and you'll be like, well, actually there's science to that. And I'm like, ooh, that's the thing. I love understanding the science behind things, because then I feel like it's a lot easier to buy in. So, like, I think what you said earlier is that cognitive stress depletes, when we're depleted, that it impacts our physical behavior. And I think understanding that as a coach is massive. Like, that to me is such a game changer, because again, we're only seeing one thing, but it could be a myriad of different reasons why we are seeing that one thing.
Well, flip it on its head and go, physical stress also affects your cognitive states.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if someone walks in moody, or they're having immune system responses, or this kid's sick all the time, or they're injured all the time, it's because the physical stress, they're not tolerating that very well, because we don't provide an environment, and that we as clubs with our training load, for them to recover from it, to adapt from it.
Right.
They don't get that time to grow resilient towards it. So we have this seesaw effect, and it's pendulum swinging each way, and it's banging into each other, and they're causing problems. It's not creating the high performance that we want.
Right. Totally.
In addition to attention has bandwidth. It has a total cost. Like, you can't, if a kid's walking in from school or walking in physically stressed, their attention is depleted.
Right.
If they came in staring at their phone and social media, we have these neurons in our brain that have a hierarchy, and that phone thing is really a high attention grabber, and it fatigues it out. So they're already walking in compromised.
Right. It's so funny, like even if you think about it technically, tactically on the field, a lot of area that we really are focused on in tactically is goalkeepers solving pressure, because that's like the evolution of the game, right? We need to defend with the ball, control the game with the ball, even as a goalkeeper. By us keeping possession, it limits the opportunities for the opponent because they can't score if they don't have the ball, right? And even at the pro level, we see goalkeepers just lump it down the field because they feel pressure, right? They feel that pressure, and that pressure creates an anxiety. And when you are anxious, you actually lose peripheral vision. And so imagine you're in a jungle and you see a tiger. It doesn't matter that there is a giraffe to your right. You don't see that because you're focused on that tiger that is threatening you. Same thing on the field. Like I'm focused on that one piece of pressure that is threatening and creating this anxiety within me. So like you said, that emotional state that we're in definitely impacts the physical outcomes as well. But the same is in reverse. Like where I'm feeling anxious and I don't see that there's space over here that I could just take a touch into because I'm just so anxious. But
If you looked at the chemistry of someone who's anxious versus someone who's confident, their blood work looks different. Different hormones are released, and so you're talking about arousal level as it starts to creep up and raise up and raise up, and they go, oh, I'm getting pressure from over here, and things. You're starting to feel that feel that rise, and then it splits off into two different roads. One is either a fear, anxious state, or one is confidence. So, as coaches, we create an environment that has the high pressure, the stress, but it steers them towards the confident side, not the other route.
Right. Well, I think one of my biggest things on our podcast is we can identify the problems all day long, and we probably could whinge about it for hours like we have done on the past. But I also really think it's important for us to have some tools or something that we can focus on to make it better. So would you be able to share with us one way that coaches can be more mindful of the environment they're creating, one way adults can help facilitate that environment, and one way that players can operate in any kind of environment that might be helpful? If they're in a great environment, that's amazing. But also if they're not in a great environment, what can they do to manage those?
Yeah, I mean it's a loaded question, isn't it? Because it's a complicated topic. And then you have to look at what's really within your realm of control and what's not. For one, number one is awareness. So if I'm a coach and I'm about to show up to a practice, you may need to pause in the car for a little bit and reflect on your day, process what you need to process so you can be clear-minded and make sure that that's not coming onto the field with you. And so you can create the right experience. And that probably goes for the parents as well. Everyone needs to pause and reflect on their stuff so they can come and meet on common grounds here, right? Number two, this is a tricky one for coaches because it's 1v22 essentially, or 1v18, whatever the numbers are, but really connecting with your players and create an environment of trust. And that means you need to be consistent with how you approach things and how you communicate with everybody. Trust comes from repeated experiences, and you can trust on different levels. First off, you need to have the trust of competence, meaning you know what you're doing. That's technical trust. You need to have a good character, meaning you say you're going to do something and you do it. And that creates that version of trust. And then connecting, caring deeply. Even if you can only care deeply and have a conversation with someone for 30 seconds, do it fully intently, and then say, I'm sorry, I got to come back to this or whatever. Don't brush things off. And that's how you get to the point where you can start to achieve results. But it starts with those foundational principles. And right now it's a tricky one. There's a lot of different reflection methodologies. Writing notes to your future self is an interesting exercise, I think, because it kind of gives you an idea of where you're at right now and where you want to go and the type of person you need to be to get there. So it gives you a process to be a better coach and create better environments. A lot of tools that I could share with you that you could share in the notes if you wanted.
Yeah, definitely. And then how do I identify if, as a parent, how do I identify if my player is in a good environment for them?
Ooh, another good question. Well, let me flip that back onto you. What do you think? You're a coach, you're a parent.
Yeah, I think overall, to me, the most important thing is the way that someone speaks to my child or the way that someone interacts with them, whether it's in a game, high pressure situation, must win situation, championships on the line, or it's just at training. Does that coach, obviously, it's okay to hold people accountable and it is okay to have expectations for a player. But what's maybe not okay to me is berating a player or,
Yeah.
tearing them down. And even the people that say they tear people down to build them back up, like I'm not about that either. Like, I don't think that is healthy, needed, required. I think asking questions to me is the best way to gain information to help players get to whether it's a better performance state, like mentally, or a better performance in general, asking questions. And there's plenty of quote uncoachable kids or quote bad kids out there that I think are just wildly misunderstood and probably they don't have a connection with someone. But when you actually stop to ask questions of like, hey, you said something that was like pretty unsavory. Is something going on? Or how can I support you? Because that's just not who we are. It's not about the behavior. It's not about how you act. It's just not who we are, bringing it back to an identity. So ultimately, to answer your question, I just think it is about how you speak to people and how someone feels when they're around you. Do they feel like, wow, I'm inspired, I'm empowered? Do I feel like that person cares about me? Or do I feel timid? Do I feel less than? Do I shrink when I'm in that person's presence? I think those, to me, are pretty good indicators.
I think I completely agree with you. And psychological safety was going to be my number one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is the environment safe? And when I drop my kid off, when I come to pick them up, am I assured that they're going to be okay, even if there are difficult situations within a training session?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a systemic one. That's not just players. That comes from player to player interaction and all that kind of stuff. This needs to be a safe environment, and tolerating unsafe stuff because the kid is a star forward doesn't work anymore. Like
Right.
that's got to be the number one. And then coaches who are vulnerable, and I think vulnerable in the things they don't know, and vulnerable in asking for help from a parent. And it's like, what's your feedback? What's your guidance within this? That's another tricky one because it's parents get really engaged, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a product of how much they pay to play, and I understand that, and how much they are sacrificing to get their kid to practice on time. Like, I totally understand all that stuff, but there's still got to be rules and lanes that we're playing in here for their kid. But coaches being vulnerable, allowing players to be vulnerable even though they're in a position of authority, and genuinely listening to them, um, and then outsourcing when someone needs help. There's no expectation that a coach should go in there and solve mental health problems or physical problems, but understanding that that kid needs to be guided and mentored towards a nice resource that's going to help them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really fair. I think that's a good point.
Yeah,
Okay,
because we talk about this very broad topic, and there's so much facets to it, and it's complex.
sure.
It's not fair to a coach to take all of it on,
Mm-hmm.
but with the ecosystem of a club needs to have this stuff in place so we can identify and help guide people to the right resources when they
Yeah,
need it,
right.
and not be part of the problem.
Right. So my biggest takeaways from our conversation is that if you want to win, if performance really does matter to you, then creating an environment that is psychologically safe should be as equally as important. Number one. So this isn't just some like frou-frou thing that, kumbaya, we should make everyone feel good and happy and included. No, this is actually, yes, it is part of that. We want to help people develop life skills and bring out their best selves and refine their character. But we also do want to win. We are in a performance environment where winning is important, results matter, and they work very well hand in hand. The more you care about the environment, the better your team's going to do, and the more people are going to show up and enjoy themselves and get better as players. That is fact.
Yeah, I mean the psychological safety piece is huge, because if you give someone critical feedback and they don't feel safe, they're going to go defensive, or they're going
Mhm.
to interpret it as something negative. If it's psychologically safe and they have trust, they will understand that you are trying to give them information that is going to help them. This isn't about being all positive and holding, and we're just joking around. We're creating performance. We're creating the environment so you can get to work in a positive way and get to your outcomes that you want.
It's funny you say that. I just experienced that with someone in the punditry world who I have no relationship with, who was a jerk to me and feedback wise. And I was like, okay. I felt myself get very defensive initially. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to regulate my emotions. I'm going to take a walk and I'm going to let this sink in. And I was like, you know what? I will respond within my character of like acknowledging that he took time to write that. But also at the same time, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to go to the people who I actually trust to give me real insightful information. And I thought the way that he delivered his feedback was tasteless. And you're absolutely right. My body had a physical response to that in a very defensive manner instead of, okay, I'm going to actually just take my emotions away from this and be a little bit more rational and logical rather than emotional about this feedback and maybe seek some other ways to get feedback. But I think you're right. That's so important. And I think when someone knows what your aspirations are, like as coaches, if we know what each player's aspirations are, we really can help them live up to those dreams that they have for themselves. And we can also inform them and educate them on what might need to occur before they can get to that level, which requires connection.
Yep. And being cynical and negative is easy.
Yeah.
Being positive, especially in times of stress, and it takes intentional work. And that's why this is such a difficult thing, because you have to be intentful and you have to get reps at it and practice it and get your brain conditioned to those pathways, because the easy pathway in your brain is negative and cynical, because that's how we survived over time. Doing the positive thing is relatively new from an evolutionary standpoint, and it's trickier because it takes work.
But don't you just feel better when you coach like that? I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Like no part
And
of
I've created really negative environments unintentionally because it achieved results, at least the results I thought it would. And I created environments that I thought that I thrived in when I played, but the players I had in those environments, it didn't work for them.
Right.
And it didn't make sense to me. And in reality, now that I've been out of the game long enough from a playing standpoint, and I look back on the environment that I was in and that I created for myself and I thought I was thriving in, I was abusing myself the whole time.
Yes.
And I'm like, wow, no wonder I've got these problems. I was so horrible to myself. And it wasn't the coach I was working with, it was me. And I thought that drove me to work harder. I was so mean to myself. And now I have these things that I got to work out, and I continue to work out. And that's why I help educate coaches on this. Like, that's not the way.
Right. Yeah, I think also like when we're younger, we all have experiences, and some of us have experienced trauma, and we've adapted in a certain way that we think that will serve us well when we get a little bit older, but it actually doesn't. And we are under this misconception that I need to be yelled at in order to perform better. I don't think so. But anyway, well, Ben, you're doing really important work, not only in the goalkeeping space, but just in sports in general. And you're bringing a lot of education to people who really need it. And, just these conversations, I think, are so important that people can really benefit from. But where can our viewers find you if they have questions or if they want to dig a little bit deeper into these topics?
You can follow me on Instagram. I think it's under Athlete Complete or Dragavon Performance. I think both those work.
We'll put it in the notes.
Yeah, and I have a website, dragavonperformance.com, that might be under construction, but I got someone working on it. That's the backside of running a business, where I'm like, hopefully that gets done.
Tori and I always end this podcast with a question, and I'm going to ask you a question. We'll both answer. But if you had to pick a combination of goalkeepers, you could just choose one if you want, of attributes that you really admire, what would you choose?
Oh boy. I love Allison right now. I like what he does. It's just because he blends that Brazilian style with, modern technical work. And he's just like, some of the moves he does, especially in 1v1 situations, I think are revolutionary. I was actually talking to a guy I work with in my facility, and he does jujitsu training, and we were looking at some of the way he approaches an attacker, and he's like, "Yep, that's just how you shoot in jujitsu. You drop down, you do this thing." And I was like, cool.
Yeah.
And I love the kind of overlapping with different sports and kind of getting into those conversations. I find that really interesting, but what he's doing is pretty wild.
That's cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
I'm a big Liverpool fan, so Allison obviously is one of the top in the world for me as well. I think this year in the NWSL has been really really cool because there's so many different types of goalkeepers that are playing right now. Like the Germans have come over and I think they've been fantastic. Berger's been, to me, the most well-rounded goalkeeper in the league. And then you've got young goalkeepers like Mandy Hott who are performing at a high level. I think she's probably the most well-rounded goalkeeper in America that we have right now. I think it is unique. And I asked this question because the goalkeepers that are listening, I want them to really have a really deep understanding that the game and the position can be interpreted in so many ways, and there's no right or wrong way. It's just what is unique and effective for you. And I think in order for us to find out what our strengths are and how to operate within different scenarios, it really does require a lot of our environment to be safe, because we have to be brave and make exploratory decisions within our environment. And it's a lot easier to do that when you know that you're safe and that the mistake that you made or error isn't going to be negatively thrown back into your face or judged. It is simply information rather than a judgment. So Ben, thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to continuing to have you back on the podcast and working with you in different webinars and different ways to educate parents and coaches and players, because the work that you're doing is so important.
Awesome. Love your work.
Thanks, guys. Catch you later.